Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be back here in Wroclaw at the Wroclaw Global Forum at a time when events in Europe's East are challenging the democracy, the prosperity, the security issues that are the pillars of the Atlantic values that we discuss here at Wroclaw. We're going to continue this morning with a focus on security in particular. We're about to begin a conversation on security, reshaping transatlantic defense and security for a post-Crimean world. To kick off this conversation, we're going to start with Poland's Minister of Defense, Tomasz Siemoniak. We're delighted to have you here at Wroclaw. As Fred Kemp mentioned, we were just delighted to host the Minister of Defense at the Atlantic Council just in April, not too long ago, where he made a statement while in Washington that because of events in Ukraine today, we actually know what we need NATO to do now after it draws down in Afghanistan. So I think we'll look forward to hearing from the minister this morning of what kind of alliance. As Defense Minister, Minister Siemoniak has presided over a period of defense investment in Poland on an uptick, a different trend from many other allies across the alliance, something just given a boost this week by the President and Prime Minister's announcement by a further increase in defense investment, 25% increase over the past 5 years. This is a minister that brings to his career a mixture of background in media, public affairs, and politics. Having served as Minister of Defense since 2001, let me turn the floor over to you to kick off this conversation. Thank you.
Good morning. I don't know where the gentleman is sitting, but I promise you that I will stick to the military discipline. Mr. President, the Deputy Secretary General of NATO, ladies and gentlemen, very long ago, but geopolitically long ago, so 1 year ago, I had an opportunity to participate in one of the important meetings in one of the European capitals with the participation of the foreign affairs policy experts. Our ambassador was presenting to me various persons. This is an emerging star in foreign policy. This is an excellent expert. And here he says, Minister, this is a leading MP dealing with foreign policy. And then he bowed to me and said to my ear, he is a transatlantic expert. This is how it happened not long ago, that the experts on transatlantic links were meeting in very remote, murky places. Wrocław was an exception. For 5 years, it organizes the Wrocław Global Forum. I very much appreciate this invitation, and I would like to thank all those who contribute to an increasing success of this conference. This is the most important event of this kind in Poland, so I wish you some further successes, and I want to say that the whole community dealing with the security policy, and I'm speaking here on behalf of Ministry of National Defense, is closely following this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, the historical context of the transatlantic issues is very strong and prominent. We have the 17th anniversary of allies landing in Normandy. It is difficult to imagine even more transatlantic event in the whole history. Actually, we have so many anniversaries this year that due to other events we are not even able to celebrate all of them. 15 years in NATO for Poland. A few days ago, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of Poland regaining freedom, where the security issues of Europe and Poland became the priority. It is very difficult under such conditions, having so many events happening and the changeability of the situation, to pursue the defense and foreign policy to formulate longer-term visions. However, we are meeting here, among others, in order to, and that's why we are dealing with this issue, to draw practical conclusions and to know how to pursue the policy in our countries. It is not a secret for anyone that before the crisis, NATO was at a juncture. There was this ongoing discussion what to do next, which kind of NATO after Afghanistan operation is over. And in this area, we had many ideas, declarations, initiatives. Nevertheless, everyone realized that with the abundance of all the ideas, there is this negative side showing that member states have less and less capabilities and they are spending less and less on defense matters. I think that this current crisis was for NATO a very strong wake-up call. NATO should draw conclusions from this crisis. We've been working very intensively, and it so happens that in September we'll have a NATO summit in the UK, which was planned in advance, and I think it will be a very important event. Well, much has been said already today. For example, the president about the Ukrainian-Russian crisis. Our assessments are very well known. I'm not going to dwell on these ideas. It is good that the West has agreed on basic facts that the two words aggression and annexation are taken here without any doubts, and despite some efforts, they are not marginalized or put in a relative light. When it comes to the Russian policy, and this topic has also surfaced here, I'm pessimistic. Well, return to the dark side of power became very tempting. We had what kind of supportist policies enjoying in the society, and we well remember this part of the world that an imperial idea is driving Russia for 300 years, the 20 so years. We can define them differently. Some say it's a period of the peace dividend is just an exception to the rule rather than a rule. What is disquieting is what I mentioned, that this imperial concept is enjoying such a support in the Russian society, also among its elites. Those who watched the session of the Russian Federation could see that there was no opposition to the use of force, just the opposite. So we are afraid that the painful tendency that we know so well can escalate, and we cannot deny to what President Obama said, that peace and prosperity are not given once and for all. The current crisis will be the one for a long period of time. We don't see the perspective for it being resolved. There is no good path forward, and there is no good path backward. It is impossible to imagine that Russia gives Crimea back to Ukraine. And it is for that reason that the conclusions that NATO and West will draw have to be long-term ones. I'm fully convinced that the weakness is encouraging to further expand. That's why the Wales Summit may prove to be the most important summit in the history of the alliance, certainly in the history of the last 25 years. The decisions which are to be made by the member states are quite simple. They boil down to do concrete things. First of all, it is necessary to increase the defense spending. Dear allies, We need to put the money on the table, and that's it. Then we can have smart defense, more for less, pooling and sharing. Actually, I was always impressed in how a sophisticated way you can say that we don't have the money. Sorry for being so straightforward, but Poland for many years has been really increasing the spending expenses on defense. We had about 25 years increase, which makes us an exception in the whole alliance. Recently, our president and the prime minister announced that we are going to increase the spending from the level of 1.95 to 2% of GDP, which gives a mandate to say about these things in a very straightforward way. One does not need to have military education nor a huge knowledge in order to realize and remind oneself that in order to wage wars or to keep peace, you need three things: money, money, and once again money. On the strength of our decision to increase the defense spending, which is resulting from the assessment of our situation, our needs, but also we would like to give a clear signal to other allies. Secondly, the presence of NATO in the Mid and East Europe, the presence of infrastructure, equipment, and troops. Why thousands of American soldiers are deployed in the countries which don't have the sense of threat? They are far from the crisis. Up until the end of the Cold War, they were close to this border of threat. The logics are clear. We need the troops where the threat is. This is the basics of defense and deterrence. The key to the breakthrough in NATO is the attitude of the US. Their willingness for leadership, the willingness to get involved in the security of Europe. This will prevail the fate of the Cold War and the Second World War. Poles do appreciate the strong voice of President Barack Obama from the Castle Square that will never stand alone. The words are sticking in our minds and in our hearts. This is the very essence of transatlantic spirit. We also see in his activity, in the activity of Senator, this transatlantic spirit. We really admire Senator John McCain, Senator, for saying transatlantic icon, but in the younger generations of senators, your voice is very clearly heard. 1 week ago, I hosted in Warsaw Senator Ted Cruz, who called himself the child of Reagan. Let's take a note that yesterday we had the 10th anniversary of the death of this great American president. I also wanted to add that in the word transatlantic, I also appreciate the role of Canada. We very much appreciate the fact that Canada got really involved in the crisis in our region. I also think that this is an important and good example and a good sign. The conclusion for now and for the future for NATO is also the support for Ukraine. I'm convinced that the investment in security, independence, integrity of Ukraine is the investment in security of Europe. It is also one of the basic premises of the Polish foreign policy. We heard about Prime Minister Jan Krzysztof Bielecki, who recognized the independence of Ukraine as the first state. The case of Ukraine will show whether the partnership brings these real effects, and the policy pertains to some other countries, just like Georgia and Moldova. Ladies and gentlemen, It is rightly said in the title of the panel, "The World After the Annexation of the Crimea," because we still have other hotspots of the world. So it should be the encouragement. It is the encouragement to test the resolve of the international community, the West and the US. We Poles obviously focused on the closest neighbors, are not losing from our radar screens the Balkans, the Mid East, Africa, Afghanistan. With regard to NATO, it still needs its global role. Crisis management, cooperation with partners. Poland, just like in previous years, is ready to really get involved. I also wanted to add that this global approach brings some benefits with it, which is the consolidation with the countries sharing the same values, and also the allies of the US, just like Australia, Japan, Korea, and other states. As NATO, we are not standing globally alone. So let's take a wider look, also across Atlantic, just like Atlantic Council is doing, the head of which I would like to say hello to and thank for his great hospitality. Your work, your contribution to Global Forum is a great job. I would like to thank the Mayor, Rafał Dudkiewicz, for his support and hosting this very important event. Let me also recognize the presence of Professor Andrew Mikta, because he listens to me for the fourth time in a short period of time. The fact that he's here makes me look for originality. So in order to avoid the traps of copy-paste, I'm writing manually my speech. Thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned about my address in April in Atlantic Council. I had an honor to speak to more than 100 transatlantic experts. But during the Q&A session, one of the participants stood and said, "I'm from Russia today. Are you Poles not regretting that you are supporting Ukraine?" And I replied in Washington, just like here in Wroclaw, "No, we are not regretting it. Thank you."
Martin Zaborowski, General Cartwright, Senator Klich, Ambassador Vershbow, Minister Schneider, and Dr. Miller. Terrific, thank you. Come on up. I think we will be doing this in English, so we will be okay. Terrific. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. That was a fantastic kickoff to the conversation. We're going to drill down on security right now. I'm Damon Wilson, Executive Vice President of the Atlantic Council. We're going to continue the conversation that the Minister just set up on the idea of reshaping transatlantic defense and security policy for a post-Crimean world. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end in Crimea. As we've already heard, we had Georgia, Crimea. We're watching what's unfolding in the Donbass today. Where does this go? What's next? The premise of the conversation that we're going to have is that Putin's aggression, the annexation of Crimea, the insurgency in Ukraine today, challenges the foundation of the post-Cold War security structure in Europe. We heard from President Ilves. In fact, it's worse than that. It's a Hobbesian world that we're back in. So, if that's true, what does this mean for transatlantic defense, transatlantic security? We've had dramatic developments this week. We're gathering here in Wroclaw just as fighting has been escalating in Ukraine and Ukraine's east on the border between Luhansk and Russia itself, with a new president being inaugurated on Saturday, President Poroshenko tomorrow. President Obama, who was just in Warsaw here to dramatically announce a $1 billion new initiative on a European reassurance initiative and ordering a new review of U.S. force structure in Europe. Poland responding quite dramatically to that with a commitment to increase its defense spending up to 2% of its GDP. So will the United States really be able to follow through on a sense of a U.S. recommitment to European security? And will that engender, on the European side, not just Poland, not just Estonia, but will that engender a European recommitment to defense as well? What are the implications for NATO? We've heard the minister say that we may be headed to the most important NATO summit in Wales this September that we've had ever, if not in the past 20 years. But does that mean that NATO veers back to focus on collective defense? What happens to the idea, the vision of a Europe whole and free? After all, that's how Ukraine fits into this narrative, isn't it? The appetite for enlargement. And what about the agenda that NATO was working on before? Reaching out to global partners, thinking about instability to its south in the Middle East, its partners in the East. What happens with that agenda? So I have an incredible panel up here to get into this conversation, and I have an impossible task. We're running a little bit late, so we're going to run a little bit over, so bear with us. But we have just a fantastic lineup. We have General Jim Cartwright, former Vice Chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, who is now the Harold Brown Chair at CSIS, and an Atlantic Council Board Director, therefore one of my bosses. Senator Bogdan Klich, who is the former Minister of Defense of Poland, someone who I had the opportunity to work with when he was minister, and I worked at the National Security Council, a member of the Parliament, and someone who speaks out frequently on the issues of the alliance. Ambassador Sandy Vershbow, we're just absolutely delighted to have back to Wroclaw and to have with us the Deputy Secretary General of NATO, who's been outspoken on all of these issues, coming to NATO, having served as a top Pentagon official in Washington and as ambassador to NATO, ambassador to Russia, and ambassador to South Korea, an extraordinary diplomatic career, followed by Minister Jiří Schneider, who is now a senior fellow at the Prague Security Studies Institute in Prague and a former deputy foreign minister, a good colleague of ours as well, and Dr. Jim Miller, who is joining us now as a former Undersecretary of Policy at the Pentagon, where he led many studies, now President of Adaptive Strategies, I believe. And of course, everyone knows Marcin Zaborowski, who is one of our co-hosts here with the director of PISM. So to get our conversation, I think it makes the most sense, if I might, to turn to Ambassador Vershbow, who is here flying the flag of the alliance at the Wroclaw Global Forum. We've just heard, a conversation about how, in some respects, Putin's actions in the East have changed Wales, have changed the trajectory of the alliance as we head towards the summit. The alliance, in many respects, is moving east. President Obama is in Europe right now talking about this European Reassurance Initiative. And yet you've also had this long-standing agenda of expanding NATO's aperture and thinking strategically about how the alliance weathers drawdown in Afghanistan. What does this all mean for the alliance right now and for the agenda that you're working on, Ambassador Vershbow? Please kick us off.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Damon. It's great to be back in Wrocław. And thanks for the invitation. And it's good to be on a panel with my former boss, Jim Miller, and also with Minister Siemoniak to kick it off. I think it's a false choice to say that NATO has to choose between focusing on collective defense and continuing to reach out and pursue a global agenda. You know, the bottom line is we have to do both. And of course, our strategic concept adopted in sunnier times in 2010 laid out collective defense, crisis management, and cooperative security as the three core tasks of the alliance. And even though Russia's aggression against Ukraine has changed the strategic environment in fundamental ways, all three of these core tasks still remain essential, valid, and vitally important for our security. President Ilves said it quite eloquently. In Ukraine, Russia has changed borders through force. It continues to subvert a sovereign state through covert means and a cynical disinformation campaign. It's ripped up the international rule book, and it's sought to create a sphere of influence based on a very dangerous new doctrine of limited sovereignty for countries that form part of the so-called Russian world. NATO has stepped up to meet the challenge. Since the crisis began, we've taken a number of concrete steps to strengthen our collective defense from the Baltic to the Black Sea, and now every single one of the 28 allies is contributing to this reassurance effort, whether through aircraft or ships, troops on the ground, commanders or planners for our forces, and Poland deserves special thanks in this regard, and indeed it's the lead nation right now in our reinforced Baltic air policing mission. But we're also looking at the longer-term implications of Russia's actions for the alliance. Earlier this week, we had our defense ministers meeting, and they discussed a readiness action plan as a likely deliverable for the Wales summit. This will include a number of steps, including improving the reaction time of the NATO response force, so we can respond at very short warning, enhancing our intelligence and our awareness capabilities, pre-positioning equipment and supplies further east, and carrying out more high-intensity military exercises based on more demanding scenarios. We're also continuing to work hard. I think we have to work harder to fill capability gaps that still exist within NATO, both across the Atlantic and within Europe, and we're focusing on all the key enabling capabilities: drones, transport planes, special forces, deployable command and control that are needed to react quickly, together, and effectively to all threats, whether they're in Europe or beyond Europe. And developing these capabilities does put a premium on our smart defense multinational projects and on further regional cooperation, and here Poland, working with its Visegrad partners, has set a good example. But ultimately, credible defense and deterrence require credible investment. As Minister Siemoniak said, we have to reverse the downward trend in most allies' defense spending over the past few years. Today, very few meet the NATO 2% of GDP goal. Poland is just below 2%, but has already pledged to push across the 2% threshold. But more allies need to progressively increase their defense spending, as well as the share of the spending that goes to modernization and acquisition, now that their economies are beginning to recover. So the crisis in Ukraine has made us go back to basics when it comes to collective defense, but it can't and it mustn't lead to a self-centered, inward-looking alliance. At the summit in Wales, we have to continue to focus on all aspects of the future NATO that we need to meet evolving 21st century security needs. And this means not just the right capabilities, but the right connections. Our dialogue and cooperation with partner countries has been and should remain a vital part of our vision. This applies, first of all, to our partnerships here on this continent, including with Ukraine and other eastern neighbors whose sovereignty is being challenged by Russia. Partnerships remain a crucial instrument for assisting reform, for spreading stability, and creating the Europe whole, free, and at peace that has been our long-standing goal. And for those European partners who aspire to membership in the alliance, we must keep our door open, no matter how much Russia seeks to draw new red lines, and help the aspirants walk through it in the spirit of the Membership Action Plan that was launched 15 years ago. At Wales, we have to continue to take an even broader perspective. Countries in North Africa and the Middle East face enormously difficult transitions, continuing turmoil in that part of the world, and we have to see what we can do to help them develop their own defense capacity, working in tandem with the European Union, the United Nations, and regional organizations like the African Union. And we have to strengthen interoperability with our most capable partners, countries like Finland and Sweden here in Europe, but also countries further afield in the Gulf, in the Asia-Pacific region, Australia, Japan, South Korea. So, in sum, when it comes to shaping transatlantic security and defense in the post-Crimean world, as you call it, we should avoid false choices. Our duty, of course, is to defend the 28 allies against any possible risk or threat to their security, whenever and wherever it may occur. But this also means that we need not only the right capabilities, but the right connections so that we can deter aggression at home and project stability abroad. Thanks very much.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Ambassador Vershbow. I want to turn to Minister Klich, Senator Klich. Having stepped down as Minister of Defense, you remain very active and vocal on the issues of transatlantic security. And in one of your recent pieces, I think entitled NATO After Ukraine, it seemed to me that you were questioning NATO's, both its capability and its willingness to be able to protect the eastern flank of the alliance. So let me just ask, you've heard Ambassador Vershbow sort of lay out what he laid out as a robust agenda for the alliance. You've heard President Obama in Warsaw this week talking about the strengthening of U.S. commitment to security here. Do you still continue to harbor concerns about the alliance's resolve and both of its willingness will, capability to actually defend the East. Let's hear from you, Senator, please.
This is a paradox, because ironically the Russian aggression against Ukraine has dispelled our doubts whether the alliance is still needed. It means that this question was replaced by the other question, whether the alliance is able to deal with crises like this one. I mean, with the crisis in the neighborhood, in a very direct neighborhood. In this context, the commitment to the collective defense must be strengthened from the Polish perspective, and not only from our national perspective, but also from the perspective of the other countries of this region. In NATO practice, it means that Article 5 is still a political commitment, and it has to be anchored. It has to be rooted in the practical side of, operational side of our activity. It means that it is in our interest to have more guarantees, more firm guarantees, that the alliance will respond effectively to the crisis of this kind. And to do that, according to my knowledge and opinion, we have to answer four main questions before and during the Newport summit. The first one, it is how to keep the US in Europe, how to keep the European, how to keep the American forces and American involvement in European affairs. From that point of view, the recent declaration of President Obama that Americans are ready to invest more political effort and more money into enhancing and strengthening the eastern flank is a declaration going in a good direction. The second question, it is about Europe, how much Europe should be within NATO. It is also the question about how much Europe should be within the European Union if we think about reinforcement of the European common security and defense policy. But today we are talking about transatlantic relations, so from that point of view, how much Europe in the NATO affairs is a critical question, because the financial crisis 6 years ago has caused the reduction of expenses for defense, and we have to reverse this trend, not only with pooling and sharing and the other multinational programs, but directly with the increase of investments in defense, but also with the increased political will, because this is one of the diseases of our European approach, that European leaders don't have enough political will to be more engaged and contribute more to the alliance. The third question, according to our national experiences, this is how to redefine our relations with Russia, because without any doubts they have to be reshaped. I'm not talking about changing anything in the structures, in the infrastructure of communication with Russia. We have the NATO-Russia Council. It is suspended right now, but maybe one day it will be once again the channel for communication with Russia. But according to my knowledge, what is necessary, it is the deep change of our approach to Russian new aggressive policy. What does it mean? It means that we should create a new and comprehensive containment policy. When I say containment policy, new containment policy, I'm speaking about the kind of mixture of political, economic, trade, military tools that we could use trying to stop the aggressive and expansion of Russia, especially in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and Southern Caucasus. And the fourth question is about our relationship with Ukraine. I don't have any doubts that we should use the provisions of the Charter of Distinctive Partnership that enables us to be more engaged in rearmament of Ukrainian armed forces, not only the reform of Ukrainian armed forces, but also our assistance, effective assistance to rearm Ukrainian armed forces.
Terrific. Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much for that. I want to pick up and come to your right to General Cartwright. General Cartwright, your tenure as Vice Chairman was really marked by your sort of astute handling of the future for defense and military security issues, with a focus on technology and space and issues such as that. And yet, here we are talking about President Putin that might be dragging us back to the past. As President Elvis said, a Hobbesian world. We're talking about the reality of American boots on the ground and F-16 deployments to Europe. How do you balance what's happening right now in transatlantic security in Europe's east, here in this country in particular, with the agenda of where you were driving our Pentagon on nanotechnology, biotechnology, robotics, the future of warfare? Give us a sense of how you see the transatlantic security space today, sir.
Well, I think it's been laid out reasonably well here that we're going to refocus our efforts, whether you think of it in a Hobbesian way or the realities of what's actually happening out there, increase both the capacity and the capabilities of the forces that are here and part of NATO today, in a way that fundamentally shifts us. This is not the current conflicts that we've been in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's not the same training. It's not the same utilization of forces, command and control, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. But the tools that we have put together, if there is to be a good story on this, and the amount of integration that occurred as a result of those conflicts among the NATO countries, is a leverage item that we have in our favor. It's not like we're just going in and working with somebody for the first time. We do need to reshape the posture of the forces. We do need to look at pre-positioned equipment. We need to look at capacity. We need to look at the use of the new tools. Those tools should allow us to have more decision time for national leaders, better intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Those tools should allow national leaders to be able to use a much broader tool set for addressing these kinds of incursions. And the question is, are we ready to do that? I think we are. President Obama's comments would lead you in that direction. But the types of tools that we have today, whether they be in the unmanned aircraft area or whether they be in missile defense, or whether they be in the new capabilities of command and control and surveillance, are all things that need to be brought to the problem, number one. Number two, we need to, as almost all of the speakers have said, continue the investment side. But I think particularly important in that investment discussion, a previous speaker talked about research development, R&D. That has to continue to go. That has to be part of the investment, not just on the military side, but on the civil side, in order to bring us to a position of strength that has depth to it and has a future to it. And having that long view and not just reacting to the current crisis, but setting ourselves up into a position where whatever comes down the road, decision leaders, national leaders have a much broader tool set to address the problems. The last thing we ever want to have is to run out of tools and be forced into a conflict that we don't want. And working at that and working at a broader capability across the board and across the alliance, I think is absolutely essential.
And would you agree with the characterization of Senator Klich that we may be needing to move into a more comprehensive containment strategy, perhaps a modernized containment strategy?
I think the strategy has to be laid out now, a containment type strategy. I don't know whether you want to name the baby right away on this. But you need to think about a strategy in order to align your desires to field a capability. If you don't have a strategy, then any capability is fine, and we'll just be out buying toys here. We need to understand what our objectives are and what the world we want to have looks like and how we would move there so that we can judge our progress. We will not Historically, we are not very smooth. We're going to do this, this, and this, and it just moves smoothly through that. There are going to be bumps. There are going to be challenges. You want a broad enough set of tools that you can address those. And so, to me, you know, having an idea of what that strategy looks like, I think that work has already started. But you do not want to end up reactive and chasing the hockey puck here. You want to be where it's going before it gets there. And that's the objective, and that strategy's got to lead us there.
All right, I'm going to turn to Minister Schneider, Jiří Schneider, to sort of pick up on the conversation here. After the European parliamentary elections, I saw a piece that the former Deputy Foreign Minister wrote, sort of calling out Europe and your own country, some of your colleagues in Europe for a sense of apathy. And so I want to come back to you. I guess you warned of apathy in the wake of the European parliamentary elections. Here we are in Poland, where we've just had a country that doesn't really feel apathetic about what's happening on its east, and the president, the prime minister, the defense minister have just made a strong commitment to their own defense. You've got the president of Estonia here that has certainly a country that has demonstrated its own commitment to defense through its defense spending and investment in cyber since it was under attack. And yet there's a feeling that maybe that's not carrying the weight within the alliance, and particularly here in Central Europe. In fact, I want our audience to think about this. Will the reaction of what's happened in the East, the commitment that President Obama articulated of U.S. commitment to Europe this week, of reactions coming out of governments like Poland, will that address, how will that resonate in Prague? How will that resonate in other capitals across Europe, even for our audience members who are coming from other parts of Central Europe? Please, Jiří.
Thank you, Damon. First of all, that was the point I wanted to end up, but I mean, you asked me first. I mean, the Polish success, Polish attitude in recent years resonates in Prague, and this is something we should be grateful. It's Polish stance on the security issues. It's a Polish policy towards European Union. It's Polish economic success. I think this is all very much important. And I mean, raising the benchmark to 2%, as Minister Siemoniak has said, I mean, just recently, this is a challenge to the countries in the region. I warned about this sense of complacency, apathy, which was visible in low turnout in the European elections, but I mean, there might be other signals. I was much more actually frightened by the lack of solidarity in the 25th anniversary of the Solidarity victory. Lack of solidarity, a sense of instinct that we have to close the ranks if there is a stretched hand by President Obama. We close together. And it was just the opposite from our prime minister. So it's just, and he was resonating the public emotion, which is apathy, complacency, reaping the benefits of what we have achieved, but no solidarity, no burden sharing. So I'm trying to warn that, and at the same time to be grateful and cross the fingers for Poland to keep it up, because I think this is not for granted in any of our countries. I'm sorry that this offer of reassurance, by the way, it's very much in the strategic concept, as Sandy Vershbow has mentioned, that was all debated in the wake of Georgia. And we have it in the strategic concepts, there's no reason to change. But would have this, had this reassurance from Washington came 5 years earlier, it would have been much, much easier. And had it been agreed package of mutual assurance, you might be smiling. I mean, how can Central Europe assure America? But this is about burden sharing. I think there is a value of this region, of Poland and other countries, to America in current situation. And this is, these are successful transitions. And we are back in a war of ideas. And as President Ilves has eloquently said in the beginning, in this value of ideas, I mean, we are now fighting about the heritage of this transition. Was it worth? Was it successful? Is it possible? Can other countries make it? And we are the visible example. You can do it. And the problem is that I feel in my country erosion of this ethos that it was worth. A sense of complacency, I think. We have everything. I mean, there's no reason to invest into that. People are undermining this, so I'm watching with great envy this series of celebration here in Warsaw. Congratulations, that's important, to show the emotion that 25 years of a huge success. Unfortunately, in my country, although I don't think we are less successful than Poland, I don't see this sense of proudness and attitude. And so my point, of course, capabilities are important. There's a lot of small work which is done in Visegrad, in NATO Council. I mean, a lot of small things, but you need from the top a kind of attitude, the leadership. And also, you need to fill the gaps, because it's not only capabilities, it's also about driving the wedge into our vulnerabilities. And I was all the time talking about our vulnerabilities. So I think at the same time we should focus on how should we cure our vulnerabilities. It's not just cyber, it's our mindset, which is vulnerable. And that's very important. So my final point, and this is a circle to President Ilves, who was also affiliated with RFE. When there was a decision that we will not have a missile defense facility in Czech Republic, it was a very, very, it was a cold shower. But at the time, I realized we have American facility, and this is Radio Free Europe. And it's becoming more and more important in this war of ideas and a free share of information. So that's my final point.
That's right. Ironically, you may have the most important American facility in Prague right now, given what we see in the East. With that, Dr. Miller, let me come to you. Speaking of, for those of you in the audience who may not be aware, this is probably the man in the Pentagon who has run more strategic reviews on missile defense policy, nuclear policy, cyber, space. So you had to manage a lot of these reviews during your tenure at the Pentagon. As I read President Obama's remarks and the fact sheets coming out, it looks like the United States is headed towards another force posture review in Europe. So if you had to put on your old hat, where you were actually focused on cyberspace, missile defense, these technologies and those fundamental reviews, and now you're going back to basics and doing a force posture review in Europe, how would you think the United States needs to respond to what's happening?
Damon, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to back clean up for such an outstanding panel. Minister Siemoniak, thank you for your terrific comments at the outset. As we think about the security challenges that we face today, we have to recognize that we have a set of additive challenges, additive threats. At the top of that list is clearly the challenge of coercion or conflict coming from a great power. We see that from China and the South China Sea and East China Sea, and we very clearly see that from Russia in Ukraine, and we've seen it elsewhere, going back to cyber attacks and to Georgia as well. So at the top of the list needs to be preparation for Article 5 and to prepare for the possibility of military intimidation and infiltration, and to deter that and, if necessary, defeat that. The second additive challenge, as Ambassador Vershbow referred to, is really regional conflict. After 13 years, nearly 13 years, NATO still has additional work in Afghanistan. NATO's still engaged, obviously, in Southern Europe. And if we note a little bit of history, we know that other contingencies will arise. So the alliance needs to be prepared for those as well. The third additive threat, and it is growing, is terrorism. As we look at Syria today, and as we look more broadly at Middle East and North Africa, we see al-Qaeda metastasizing. And this is a threat not just in those regions, but it's a threat to Europe and to the United States. And finally, a fourth and broader threat that we need to consider as we think about that posture review is the diffusion of new technologies and capabilities to both states and non-state actors. And at the top of that list, really, I'd put weapons of mass destruction, missiles, ballistic missiles in particular, and the cyber threats to critical infrastructure that, in fact, we've experienced in various ways as an alliance. So then what is the formula for dealing with that set of additive threats? We really do need to have additive capabilities as well. As was noted earlier, in almost 4 years ago in Lisbon, NATO built on the existing structure of conventional and nuclear capabilities, added missile defense capabilities as part of the basic structure. That's how it thinks about the appropriate mix of capabilities. Cyber needs to be added to that as well. And I just want to say I was very honored to be present for the groundbreaking of the Aegis Ashore site in Romania, and I look forward to seeing groundbreaking for Aegis Ashore also in Poland before long. National contributions across the board, including on missile defense, are vital. And I agree with the statement that we need to protect critical infrastructure and need to be prepared to be able to sustain operations of military and of our economies under pressure as well. That's a part of deterrence as well. And finally, partnering is critically important. I want to note 5 specific ways that we need to partner more effectively going forward. First is within NATO, of course, and enhanced combined planning is central to that. Second, and relatedly, we need to partner more effectively on technologies and sharing capabilities. The United States has undertaken some major efforts to reform our export control, to do better on technology security and foreign disclosure. We need to do a lot more, and I know that there are people in government still who are pushing hard on that, and we need to meet our commitments to our allies on that regard. Third, we all need to build out private-public partnerships. It goes back to both providing effective defense capabilities and to protecting our critical infrastructures. Fourth, as President Obama noted very clearly, we need to accelerate efforts to build partner capacity globally. And that includes outside of NATO. NATO's success in Afghanistan will be determined significantly by the follow-through over the next several years in building the capacity of the Afghan National Security Forces. There's a tremendous amount of work to be done globally as well, including, for example, in Libya. And fifth, we need to partner selectively outside of NATO with each other. And I think U.S. support of French operations, for example, in Mali is a good example of that. So we face additive security threats. We need additive capabilities to bring to bear. And we need to do so from a combination of strength, unity as an alliance, and reinforcing the rule of law. And behind that has to be serious military capabilities as an alliance.
Terrific. Thank you, Dr. Miller. Let me come back to one of our hosts, Marcin, here to continue this conversation and focus it back to Poland and Poland's neighborhood. Particularly if you're thinking about security and defense, there's an emerging sort of sense of clarity of what the alliance needs to do and resolve about Article 5 and protecting allies. It's not quite clear yet that the allies really understand or have come to consensus on how to work with partners. Dr. Miller was just putting an emphasis on partnering, and you also referred to this military infiltration. So how should the alliance think about its security and defense relationships with its closest partners in Europe's East? And immediately we're talking about Ukraine, of course, but also Moldova, Georgia, with an emphasis on these partners rather than the global partners.
Well, I think that what is essential is here to really start to think out of an existing box. Because when we think about Article 5 and credibility of Article 5, we tend to think about traditional deterrence. We think about repositioning of troops. We think about the exercises. We think about contingency planning and all of that. And this is all very much important and needed at this point in time. But we need to do, looking at the Crimea scenario, now looking to the Donbas scenario, we see that actually these traditional instruments wouldn't answer the needs that we have. So we need to find ways to deal with the non-traditional threats, which are of economic nature, which are of political nature, sabotage, the unarmed units and all of that. And at the same time, think about how to boost relationships with the partners which are like-minded nations like Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, which are stopping short of membership which is not on offer and which is not requested at this point in time, but which does provide some answer to what is in the security needs of these nations. For example, there was, by former Minister Klich, it was mentioned here, support in the rearming of Ukraine, perhaps providing non-lethal equipment. And as we are moving towards the Wales Summit, we should have this kind of a package on the table, I believe.
So just real quick, this has been the issue of a little bit of debate. Are there those on the panel that think we should be moving beyond non-lethal assistance to Ukraine? And in that respect, as we move forward with a country like even Moldova? On the panel, who would pick that up?
Damon, I'll say that we need to be prepared to do so. I think that where we are today is a good balance point. And just as we need to be prepared to apply much more extensive sanctions, we need to be prepared to take additional steps in that domain as well.
Senator?
I wanted to, once again, to repeat that in the case of Ukraine, we should use to the maximum possible extent we should use all those provisions that were introduced into the Charter on Distinctive Partnership. And this Charter enables us to assist Ukraine, not only in the crisis situation, but on the permanent basis. And in the crisis situation, we can assist Ukraine in rebuilding Ukrainian armed forces, or even broader, the defense sector and security sector in that country. And we can also provide Ukraine with capabilities. It means that we can rearm Ukrainian armed forces if needed.
Terrific, terrific. Thank you. Did you want to add a word, Sandy? Are you okay?
I'll pass on that.
All right. So I'm going to move into the Wroclaw Global Forum of speed dating, given that we have started a little bit late. I still want to get in a little bit under 10 minutes of conversation with the audience. So I'm going to turn to you. Please catch my eye, raise your hand. I think we've got mics that are set up on either side. Come forward to ask a question. Introduce yourself, your name, your affiliation, and if you want to target it at one of our speakers, please do so. And I know we don't have a shy crowd here in Wroclaw. So I think I see this gentleman in the center. I think it's best if they come to these mics here, or can you take a mic to them? Both. Both are available. All right.
Hello, I'm Kurt Basiner from Democratization Policy Council based in Sarajevo. I want to ask a specific question. I guess this is best directed to Ambassador Vershbow, but anybody could take it. On the southern end of the borders of NATO and the European Union, we're coming up against another area where the Russians are going to try to take advantage of our posture, and that is in Bosnia. We have a Chapter 7 military mission there that's now undertaken by the European Union. It used to be a NATO mission. That comes up for review and a vote in the Security Council in November. It's pretty clear that the Russians are going to veto it. At least we have every reason to believe they will, which will mean we'll go back to the status quo ante of not having a deterrent force there. It's already very feeble, but at least we have the mandate at this stage. And I'm curious what countermeasures are being considered, because you have very strong Russian support for the avowedly separatist government of Republika Srpska. They're giving loans on who knows what terms to the Republika Srpska government, and there's an obvious incentive for Russia to create trouble wherever they can on our periphery. And if we lose that mandate, we're going to be up against a question of either being invited, which probably won't happen, to maintain a deterrent force, or having to go without a Security Council resolution. So I just wanted to ask what the state of thinking was on that within the alliance.
Thanks, Kurt. Let me see if there's another question I can pick up right here with Yannick. And I'm going to, while the mic's coming to you, I'm going to add to Kurt's question. There's a mantra that some of us are talking about. Should our response to aggression in the East be a strategy of consolidation in the South? So not just in Bosnia, but as we see Russian activity in Belgrade, in Cyprus, in Montenegro, should we be pushing forward on enlargement to Montenegro, on a settlement in Cyprus, on locking Serbia into the EU as part of a strategic response? Please.
Thank you very much. I'm going to use smaller words. I tend to Ambassador Vershbow. What is your reading of the policy of our West European allies? Because Jiří, Schneider have spoken about our allies and friends in the region, but there is a big question mark concerning the policies of Germany and France, specifically, concerning the present conflict. Thank you.
All right, Germany and France. One more question here, please, to this lady here. Yes? Pass the mic. Yep, perfect.
Thank you. So, Armin, Compact Magazine, Germany. So, instead of focusing on maybe an extension of this conflict, are there any plans of diffusing the conflicts as peacekeeping missions or neutral observers to analyze the situation and maybe reduce the conflict?
Terrific, terrific. Final comment, final question to pick up here. Let's come all the way to the corner. Is there right over here, please?
Yes, thank you. My name is Jan Saint-Pierre. I'm the CEO of the Modern Security Consulting Group in Berlin. I'll play a bit of devil's advocate here. Today is the 70th anniversary of D-Day, which also, in a sense, is the 70th anniversary of American military presence in Europe. So my question is, at what point does the US say, well, European friends, at some point you have to take over your own security measures. We're willing to help, but you need to contribute a bit more. Isn't the Ukraine situation perhaps a situation that should compel European partners to take a larger role? As we've seen with Poland, they've been very strong about this. Can they actually put pressure on France and Germany and Great Britain to get involved more?
And a corollary to that, I'm going to come back to the panel. Did you have a real quick addition, Judy? Real quick addition from Judy, and then we're coming back to the panel. But a correlation to that, think about President Obama going on Syria and not getting support in Congress. What happens? European Reassurance Initiative, $1 billion. It's not been briefed to the Hill yet. What if this dies in Washington? Does that presage what the question just asked in terms of American commitment? Judy.
Thank you, Damon, and thank you for a great panel. Judy Dempsey, Carnegie Europe. That's exactly my question.
Sorry, Judy.
No. But isn't Obama's proposed offer, as you say, of the $1 billion, isn't it actually an indictment of the weakness of NATO?
All right, with the softball question at the conclusion here, let's come back to the panel. Maybe what we'll do is go in opposite order, and you don't feel like you have to pick up every piece of that, but let's try to cover the response there, and I'll start with Marcin, please.
Well, there's so many issues, really. I mean, I would say...
Not all of them. Pick two.
Yeah, I will pick two, indeed. I mean, I will say that the... also going back to your question, I don't think it will fall into pieces. I mean, you know the US scene, you know better than I do. I think that once, when the announcement is made the way it was made, it wouldn't be great for the US credibility if that is no falling through on that. And also, without an announcement, the US presence and NATO presence, broader presence, also the French and Canadian presence in Poland and in the Baltic states have been boosted in the last months. Without announcements, you know, it is just more of that at the moment. As to the Balkans and the enlargement agenda there, well, I think that we need to start thinking about enlargement in terms of a real contribution and what we observed in through the last rounds of enlargement is, with the exception of Estonia and Poland, once the nations have joined the alliance, their defense spending rather went down than up. So in some sense, you know, Article 5 may have this perverse impact on some nations, whereby they think that, you know, we have Article 5, so, you know, we don't really have to provide for our on security because we cover it, and what we heard at a conference in Bratislava, for example, from one of the Visegrad prime ministers is that further defense spending would be immoral, and that's from a nation that spends about 1% on GDP on defense at the moment.
Indeed, echoing Jiří's concerns. Let me turn to Jim Miller to pick up a couple of these items, if you might.
Sure, thank you. Well, let me take on the question about whether we should be taking steps to defuse the crisis, and I would say, We can do that, but we need to do it from a position of strength, and that includes having additional military assistance and much greater sanctions, as I said before, on the table. It includes helping to harden Ukraine's infrastructure as well, including from cyber attack, but others. And it includes working hard to, and it's a longer-term prospect, to strengthen the economy, including to help them move to greater energy independence. That's a long-term challenge. That's a big challenge. And with respect to the questions, U.S. or NATO, the answer, of course, I'm sorry, the U.S. or Europe in NATO, which should be doing more? The answer is both. I believe that the Congress will support the President's initiative, the $1 billion added resources for training, exercises, and so forth. And the question I have is whether it will truly be additive for the Defense Department or whether we'll have to take it out elsewhere. Certainly, I would encourage it to be, and strongly encourage it to be additive, because just as I said, we face additive challenges. You need to put more resources into that to be able to meet those.
Terrific, terrific. All right, let me pick back up with the Deputy Foreign Minister, Jiří Schneider, please.
Yeah. An ideal scenario, I think this package should snowball and be presented in the NATO summit as a package, together with the commitments of other countries, including my country, to increase reasonably their defense spending, and creating a sort of trust fund for the concrete projects, not just, you know, in absolute terms, but to say why we are doing it and for what purposes it will be used. This is the ideal scenario. But taken my recent experience and reading of what the leading Czech and Slovak politicians say, I have my doubts. But I mean, let's create this opportunity and try to push that forward. I cannot agree more. I mean, diffusion can be only from the position of strength. There will be no diffusion if there will be further support across the border from Russia. I think there should be some sign of isolating the conflict, and then we can diffuse the tension, but not without that. And that's exactly why we need United States, because European Union and none of the member states has the guts to say to Russia and to deter Russia from doing these things. This is only Washington, and it's not using it fully, in my view. So that's the reason to continue with the U.S. Involvement in the European security. This is absolutely essential.
Thank you, Jiří. Let me come to General Cartwright, please, for a couple elements you might pick up on.
Just real quick, I mean, I absolutely agree that we want to try to accomplish everything that we can short of the use of force in this conflict. The real question for us, though, is there's no doubt in anybody's mind that we have the capability and the capacity to handle this if it moves to force. The question is, do we have the will? And do we have the imperative to take the measures that have been laid out by the panel as these countries come together? That's the question right now for the alliance. That's the question that Russia's looking at and watching us. Because right now, there is a question about whether, as an alliance, we have the will.
Comes back to will and leadership. Senator Klich.
Very briefly, referring to your question concerning this $1 billion US dollars, I think that not this size of the potential engagement of the United States into the security and stability of eastern flank of NATO is important, but what is beyond that? This is the model of American deployment in Europe. After this famous pivot to Asia and Pacific region, we don't expect that the US will return to the former model of stationing their troops in Europe. We don't suppose that. We don't expect. What will be the future model of the deployment will determine the cooperation and interoperability between European and American allies after Afghanistan. So I hope that it will be the mixture of permanent stationing of American equipment and rotations of American personnel not only in Eastern, but also in Western Europe, and that this model will be created as a model of long-term perspective cooperation between the US and Europe. I hope that Sandy knows more about that. We'll know more as a public at the end of this year, but we hope that this mixture of joint exercises, joint training, but the permanent stationing of equipment and small units responsible for arranging those exercises and training will be the model adopted by the US administration.
Terrific, thank you. So the Senator has tossed the ball to you, Sandy. Please, Ambassador Vershbow.
Well, first, there are a lot of different questions addressed to me. The first one about Bosnia and the Western Balkans more generally. Indeed, there are, of course, endemic problems in Bosnia-Herzegovina going back now many years, and the continued difficulty of that country to function as a state is a frustration to all of us. But it is also true that Russia is not absent from that part of the world and is indeed using its influence in Republika Srpska, but also in Montenegro and Belgrade, in Serbia, to try to shift the geopolitical orientation of some of these countries. So our leverage, speaking from the NATO point of view, is limited. We have tried to incentivize Bosnia by offering them conditionally to join the Membership Action Plan, to get them to deal with some very basic issues relating to the splitting up of state defense properties between the entities. They have been able to meet that test for several years. But I think we do have to be politically engaged. We have to look at whether the powers of the High Representative are still enough to try to resolve some of the gridlock that affects Bosnian politics right now, and continue to do what we can through capacity building, both NATO, the EU, individual countries, to help that country overcome its stasis and be less of a pawn in geopolitical games. We might also try to work with Belgrade. Belgrade, of course, is determined to pursue its European integration, its EU membership aspirations. They don't have unlimited leverage, but they might be able to affect the calculations of the leaders in Republika Srpska. As far as the broader consolidation strategy you suggested, Damon, that'll be something debated in the coming weeks as to whether there are geopolitical implications of the Russia-Ukraine crisis for the open door for next steps in our enlargement process. I think there's still a strong view in the alliance that it has to, at the end of the day, remain a merit-based process. The countries have to meet the standards and the qualifications, but we can't ignore the geopolitical dimension and Russian efforts to improve its position in the Western Balkans.
Sandy, given our time, don't feel compelled to answer everything.
Well, there were a couple other ones.
Right, a couple other key points, and then we'll...
Eugenius Smolar asked about the response of West European allies. I could say quite honestly, we're very pleased by the across-the-board participation in the reassurance efforts. All the allies, including West European allies, have contributed, some more than others, but it's been an impressive performance. We do have tougher debates ahead between now and the summit as to what should be the longer-term approach, when it comes to issues just raised by Bogdan regarding what kind of presence do we need in the East, what mix between rotational, permanent steps such as prepositioning of equipment, frequency of exercises, and and what kind of conditions should be attached to this in terms of Russian behavior. But I think there's clearly plenty of scope, without requiring any modification to the NATO-Russia Founding Act, to do a variety of things that could bolster our presence further east and bolster deterrence in the process, while maintaining the diplomatic and political high ground of not tearing up the NATO-Russia Founding Act, even though Russia has clearly violated its spirit and its letter in many respects. Maybe I'll address the last one from Judy Dempsey. We hope that the U.S. initiative, the $1 billion proposal, not only that it is approved by the Congress, but that it serves as kind of like a challenge grant in the Atlantic Council knows in terms of international fundraising, that it will inspire our European allies and the Canadians as well to do their part to support financially what will be an increasingly expensive effort to maintain a higher state of readiness, more frequent exercises. And there's also things that need to be done in terms of the capacity building for Ukraine and other partners. NATO has limited budgets for these things. We've relied on trust funds to top up financing for Ukraine, for Georgia, for other countries. This may be a time when European allies need to dig deeper in their pockets to finance trust funds so that we can provide much more accelerated support to Ukraine, Moldova, and others in the areas that NATO is competent for, even as nations may individually deal with more direct provision of military equipment and hardware.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Sandy. If you care about those issues, we will have 5 members of Congress here. Perhaps they should hear from you on this. We are going to close, although I have a president who is admonishing me, so I'm going to turn over to the president of Estonia for a 15-second comment to close our morning conversation on security. Please, President.
Thank you. Just quickly, 2 things. The first thing, today's news from Donetsk is not what's important. What's important for the rest of the century is that the Budapest Memorandum was broken, and try to convince another country now give up nuclear arms. The least that can be done is to arm conventionally Ukraine. I mean, to wait on that after basically having one of the biggest fiascos of nuclear proliferation, I think is silly. Point 2, I think NATO should give up the last 5 years, the mantra was more for less. Is this working? Yeah?
Yes.
I think you should adopt what was not the most successful policy of the EU, which is more for more. Instead of exhortations to underperforming allies to spend more, do more with, for example, the reassurance effort. Give more to those who spend more. This is elementary rat psychology. If you press the pedal, you get a pellet. If you don't press the pedal, you don't get a pellet.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that conclusion, President. Join me in thanking this terrific panel. What a great group.